people want to do meaningful work. What is meaningful has to be meaningful for them.
Well, welcome to Exude Human Capital Consulting's Hold On, Let Me Close My Door, the podcast that brings real stories from real professionals with real solutions to you. Join us as we navigate the ever-changing workplace with Allison DeFlorio, co-founder and managing partner of Exude Human Capital, and special guest. I'm Allison DeFlorio, and I'm so pleased to have with us today someone that I have had the pleasure of working with and just being a professional partner with, Jackie Linton. Welcome, Jackie.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
We're so happy to have you. Jackie Linton is an HR professional with a really interesting background spanning a number of different industries. Jackie, could you share a little bit about your background and the work that you do today?
Sure. Well, I can honestly say I'm one of those people who has had the pleasure of reinventing myself a number of times. I started my career as an industrial engineer, and I morphed into HR through operations. And when I moved to HR, I really found my calling. But my approach to HR was very different because of my background in operations and industrial engineering. So I've spent the majority of my career in corporate America, in companies large and small. I've held a number of executive HR positions, and then I decided to go off on my own. And so now I have my own HR practice where I focus on strategic HR initiatives that are really focused around talent management and how to improve long-term results from talent.
Well, I don't know if I knew you were an industrial engineer, and that makes so much sense just in working with you and listening to how you think and how you build. And I think that this all makes sense to me. And I'd like to share with our listeners today that our topic today is really it's about building. And we're going to call this, which comes first, performance or culture? Do you build a culture first and then a performance strategy? Do you build performance and a culture? And I can't think of anyone better to guide us through this conversation. So, Jackie, before we get started, I thought it would be helpful to frame this conversation with some recent survey data that shows that there's some concern out there that still managers are feeling and perhaps struggling a bit with holding people accountable or driving performance in an organization. Listen to this. 82% of managers actually feel like they have limited or no ability to hold others accountable successfully. And less than 50%, only 40% of employees feel that managers hold them accountable to the goals that they set. So, as we start thinking about this topic, what do you think this data may suggest?
Wow. It sounds to me like that is culture issues, not performance issues. So, when I think about how I do my work, there's some fundamental things that I really focus on throughout everything that I do. First, I believe that we operate in a system, and all the pieces of the system are connected. So you can't tweak one part of the system and not change other parts of the system. So the fact that managers may not feel that they can hold people accountable may be because the system in which they operate doesn't support that. So for instance, if they feel like there are processes in their system where people will come and circumvent what they say, or if they try to hold people accountable, the person will go to someone else, then that's a system issue, and it's based on the culture. So that's one thing that's really fundamental. And when people say that their managers don't hold them accountable, that could also be a system issue, right? Managers may not know how, they may not feel empowered to do it. So all of these things operate within a system, And this system, I call this talent management system.
So, so what would you talked a little bit saying your approach to work. Can you share a little bit as to how you might approach that type of situation if,
Yeah,
if experiencing it in a client or an organization that you're working
sure.
for?
Yeah. So there are a few fundamental beliefs that I have, right? Number one is that everyone wants to do a good job. And if people aren't doing a good job, then there's reasons that, that could be outside of them why they're not doing a good job. And the fundamental belief number two is that there are only three reasons why people don't do a good job. And I don't care what the job is, if they are, sweeping the floor or robbing a bank. There's only three reasons why they don't do a good job. The first one, and the most important reason, is because they don't know what success looks like, or they don't know what the expectations are for the job. The second is that they don't have the skills, capabilities, or resources to do it well. That may mean that they don't have the right tools, or that they don't have the right capabilities to do it well. And that's really a joint responsibility between the system and the employee. The system has to give them access. They have to be willing to take it up. The first one, by the way, is strictly the responsibility of the manager. And the third reason why people don't do a good job, and by the way, this is the least likely reason people don't do a good job, is because they're not willing to do what it takes. And the reason why I believe that that is the least likely reason is because of my fundamental belief number one, is that everybody wants to do a good job. So people, if they have the right skills and capabilities, they're operating in the right system, they are more likely to want to do what it takes.
Let me ask you something about that last one. And I love that you framed it that in your experience, it's the least likely to be the reason why someone isn't going to be successful. Because I often hear people in leadership roles saying today, generationally, this younger generation doesn't want to put in the effort. They don't want to do the work. How do you respond to that?
I think that is fundamentally not true. It is, people want to do meaningful work. What is meaningful has to be meaningful for them. So to give you an example, if someone is in a job where they have to do a lot of administrative or mundane work, and they're not excited about it, they're not going to do what it takes to be successful in that, because we've not matched one and two, giving them the skills, capabilities, and resources and expectations for the job. Most people want to be a part of something important and something that they feel is meaningful. And if you can't describe the job to the individual in a meaningful way, it is not likely that they're going to be excited about doing it. So that, again, is part of that system. It's like, how do you explain to someone the relevance of what they're doing? It's not just that they're moving papers from one side to the other, is what is that accomplishing? And how is it important for them to do a good job? What is the impact of that? So it's about how you paint the picture for employees about what meaningful means.
I love that response and agree with you wholeheartedly. It reminds me of a commercial way back when that I believe Amtrak had, and it had an employee who, I can't remember what his role was, but it was a frontline employee, maybe somebody who cleaned the trains. And he said he's responsible for, the economy of the world,
Right.
but for that work, something wouldn't get done and the train wouldn't run.
That's exactly right.
You said you have three fundamental beliefs. Can you share the third?
Well, okay, the third one is that, and I've said this already, that we all operate within a system. And the system is all of the things that impact talent at your organization. And that system is heavily influenced by the culture. And if you think about it, organizations have different cultures, and some of them are very strong. Some of them are kind of, all over the place. And whatever that system is, that culture is, determines how things operate at that location, at that operation. And when I think culture, I think, what are the things that are rewarded and what are the things that are punished? What are the things that are ignored and what are the things that are addressed? If you just think about it in those four those four parameters, it will help you to describe your culture. So getting back to what you said earlier, Allison, about managers feel like they are not empowered. When I hear that, I think, like, what is it about the culture there that makes managers feel that way?
Mm-hmm.
Is it that it's not rewarded when someone holds someone accountable? Is it that maybe even it's not addressed? Or, people look the other way, they allow things to go unaddressed. And those are the kind of things that I think will describe the culture. So that's the third one, is that we operate in a system and that system is heavily influenced by the culture.
So interesting. You work with so many clients, different types of clients, different industries. What are the issues that show up the most in your work as it relates to performance and culture?
Sure. People generally call me when they're looking to improve performance. And a lot of times they will start with the end. Oh, we need to do some training. Oh, we need to do some coaching. But in fact, those things are not going to solve the problem if we don't get to the root cause. And in my work, I have found that people focus a lot of energy on the bad behaviors, the outliers. Oh, Mary isn't doing a good job, or, John has bad behaviors. But I would offer up to you that they don't spend enough time defining what good looks like. Remember what I said, the number one reason people don't do a good job. What great looks like. They don't separate what's good versus what's great. And if you believe that people want to do a great job, you have to tell them what that is. So I find that I spend a lot of my time helping clients figure out, like, what is it that they're really trying to achieve? What does great look like? And what are the things that are happening in their culture today that either enable that vision or are barriers that get in the way?
So what do you say to the organization that has a couple of those really star performers who just do things their own way and can rub people a bit the wrong way, but they are doing their job, so to speak? What do you say? How might that impact others' abilities in the organization to perform?
Yeah. I don't care how good someone is at their job, they are not as good as the collective capability of the team.
Mm.
So if their individual behavior impacts the overall behavior of the team, I would not call that person a star performer. And I would really encourage leaders to take a look at the impact that that person's behavior is having on the rest of the organization. And it's great that they're really good at their job, but if it's at the expense of everyone else, I think you're leaving some things on the table.
It's interesting because when you described kind of the factors that you mentioned that influence culture, I feel like sometimes those behaviors can be ignored.
Yeah. And here's what I have learned over the course of my career, and especially in my practice when I've had the opportunity to work across different organizations, different sizes, private, public, the whole nine yards. Here's what I have found is that in so many instances, people don't consider the impact of behaviors, especially for leaders. They think that when this leader can perform the technical parts of their job really well, then they look the other way about the behaviors. Here's what I would offer. In my experience, people often get promoted to leadership roles because they're good at the technical part of their job.
Mm-hmm.
They don't get promoted because they're good at being leaders. And organizations sometimes, mostly, often do not train leaders on how to be leaders. So how can you expect for them to really be able to do a good job? That's number two. They don't have the skills, capabilities, or resources to do it well. And when you ignore it, then you are leaving something on the table, like I said.
It's interesting you say that because we also do a lot of work in the management training space. And I agree with you. When we work with organizations, we find that many managers were promoted because they were very good at the job that they did. And it was almost as if, boom, you give them the management title and they are expected
Right.
to have, to be competent in leading others and in managing performance and in effective communication and all of those kinds of things.
Right.
Where do where some of our organizations have a regular cadence of training and a regular process to onboard managers. And I don't mean onboard necessarily externally, although it could be, but when they're promoting from within. I know that some of that got disrupted during the post-pandemic and workplace, moving from in-person to hybrid to remote. Just curious, how have you seen employers tackle managing training in this new work environment that we're in?
Yeah. Well, first of all, being remote puts a barrier into the mix, from the beginning. It's really very difficult to see what's happening with, how people are leading until it kind of gets down the road. When organizations have like the ones you work with have a cadence of doing training, it's sort of like a blanket approach. But they don't have expectations for what people should be doing with this training. Mm-hmm. And I think this, the question at the beginning was what comes first, performance or culture? This is where I think culture absolutely comes first. That if you send people to training, there should be an expectation on what they should do with that. Do you know what's in the training? Are you holding people accountable for delivering on that? Especially when it's behavior-based training. You need to let people know, like, how you expect for them to behave differently after having gone through the training. Being clear about what the expectations are. And I don't necessarily see that very often.
Interesting. And I totally agree with you. So, Jackie, if there's a leader listening to this conversation today, what would you suggest to them if they're saying, well, I really have this vision for a culture in mind, and I want to create this culture, and I want a culture of performance and accountability. How can they begin to determine or to plan for what kind of culture they want to have?
Yeah. So that's great to say I want a culture of performance, but you also have to go a little deeper to say, well, what does that really mean? What is it that I'm going to reward? And what is it that I'm not punished, but what am I going to redirect? What is it I'm going to address? And what am I going to ignore? And if you just put those four items in four different columns, and then you write down what goes under each one of them, that will help you to see what in your mind as the leader it means to have a culture of performance. Then I would say storytelling is a very powerful tool. So when you have worked it out in your mind, what that performance culture looks like, tell people about it. Describe it to people so that they can see it too, so that they know what it looks like when you're really successful at it. And when you see people operating in that way or doing a really good job, highlight them. Let people know this is what good looks like. And so they can see, oh, okay, this is what I should be, trying to achieve. Because otherwise they would just look around at what gets allowed in the organization, and they'll say, okay, that's what I need to do. So you have to be really intentional about describing to people what great looks like.
You make it sound so simple. And I know that there are probably people listening right now, and I love it. It's just a very simple, organized approach. And there's some leaders listening right now. If someone wants to get started, to go back, what are those three best pieces of advice that you would have for our listeners on how to uh, create that culture that supports the performance you desire?
Yeah. So visioning is super important, but your behavior is one of the best ways to demonstrate what great looks like. People will not do what you say. They'll look at you and they'll do what you do. And the reason why is because you, the leader, are the example of success. You achieved this role. You have been successful in your career. I'm looking up at you and I say, okay, that's how I can be successful here. So you always have to model that behavior that you want others to follow. So, a good vision, modeling the behavior, and setting clear expectations for the people that work for you. Not just from the bottom. Don't just create a baseline. Help them to see what great would look like. And communicate. Your role as a leader primarily is to get things done through other people. So the more time you spend lifting up the people that work for you, the more valuable you become. It isn't just about what you can deliver as an individual. As a leader, it's the collective capability of the team.
And I love that. I think I heard you use that collective capability of the team earlier. And that truly is the effort, the impact of a great leader is really to lift the entire team to be able to perform at its best.
Totally.
Jackie Linton, thank you so much for taking time to share your insights and expertise with our listeners today. We hope that we get you back for future conversations in some of the other areas that you work in.
I would love that. It's been great.
And to our listeners, thanks so much for tuning in once again to Hold On, Let Me Close My Door. Until next time.